All right, let's do this. Starting to stream, and I'm just going to go into YouTube, and you guys, you're going to see me recording while I'm talking. I'm doing it through this YouTube stuff. I want to talk about this before we start going, and I want to talk about my channel a little bit. Okay, so when you have a channel, in order for you to stream, you need to have your channel verified. All right, that's one thing you have to do. So again, do I need you guys to be streamers? No, I don't. I don't need that. But what I need you to understand is what content happens when you create it. If you go to content in your channel, and by the way, hello for people who are watching me, you can see that there's videos that I've uploaded. That's what this is. And this is where I've gone live. So here's where I'm actually streaming live. You can see that there is a part that I'm actually going to go live with. And then again, you can do things like modify a playlist if you want to create a playlist, which I'm going to do right now. As well as I can also upload a thumbnail. So notice that my videos, when you get them, they have no cover. But if I want to add a cover afterwards, I can kind of take a snapshot of my PowerPoint slide and then upload it as a thumbnail to make it even nicer. Do you guys have to do this? No. But we're talking about it because I want you to kind of understand what I'm doing. I'll stop this insanity here. So that you guys, if you wanted to improve the stuff you're doing, you can do so as well. So here is the recordings for today. This is the first one. And then, of course, I'm going to put this up on here, wherever that other one happens to be. There it is. There's the channel for the chat. And then you can see that here. That's the link for the video. There we go. So that's the link for the video. This is the link for the video here. And the last place I always put it, for people who don't remember, all the video stuff is going to be up here under contents. So if you ever go to the content for the week, did I put the wrong thing? I put the wrong thing. You just kind of look up the content, and every week is that content. If you missed last week, and if you're one of those people who's new to the course, which is totally possible to do, then please take a look at the weekly contents. And every single week, every single folder, or weekly folder, is going to have everything you need. I'm just going to make this available now so you can follow along with me. And I do that not because I don't want you to see it ahead of time, but rather I'm also going to make this available because it's part of our exercise today. But rather, I want you to follow along when we're together. So, welcome back. Here we go. We're starting now. We are MDEV1001. What the hell? 1001. I never get this right. 1001 in the summer 2023 semester here at Georgian. And it's week 2 of our broadcast and recording. And this is part 1, which is kind of a preamble of what we're doing. And I also want to talk about the assignment a little bit, which is something that I'm going to release later on tonight. The details aren't completely done, only because I want to talk to you guys about it a little bit. But it shouldn't be long. But this afternoon or later on tonight, you'll see it posted with the details, and maybe we'll talk about them again next week. Okay. So we're sitting at week 2, May 17th, and this week we're talking about entity relationship diagrams and a bunch of other stuff. ICE 2 is going to be released, and it's going to be due this Sunday at midnight. This Sunday, by the way, this weekend is long weekend, right? So keep that in mind. That means that Monday of next week is, you guys are off, so there's no class. If you have classes on Mondays that week, that day, no class, right? Because we have a bit of a holiday here, and what I'd like you guys to do is rest up as much as possible on that Monday, because there's nothing that I have to do for you. I'm not sure if anyone else will have things to do, other professors. But that Monday, just take it easy, do some gaming, hang out with people, whatever, call home, whatever you have to do, relax, watch your shows, and don't do anything else. That's what I recommend, because you're not going to have a lot of these times together where we don't do anything. There's always going to be something we're doing. And this is one of those times you have a chance you're completely off. So take that opportunity to do that coming up. Last week, what did we do? We talked about our course orientation. We kind of did, what is this course about anyway, kind of talk, which was, this course is about, it's called data management, but what the heck does that mean in terms of mobile? What is data management anyway, right? We talked about that this is going to cover a couple of things. We're going to cover databases, what they are. And maybe you've had some, I'm putting my hand up, some experience with databases in the past. Maybe it's not new to you. It's okay. It's okay. It's a review for some of you. For some of you, it's brand new. You've never done databases to this detail, right? And it's okay. Everything is okay. We also talked about a little bit about relational versus non-relational databases last week, and that was one of the questions that I had on your in-class exercise. In-class exercise 1, I said, hey, talk to me a little bit about relational and non-relational database. When I get to marking your in-class exercise 1, which should happen by the end of the week, I'm hoping, right? Then if I get to do that, you'll have your feedback. I'm going to watch your videos. I'm going to watch all your videos. I'm going to see your stuff. I'm going to take a look at your GitHub repositories, all those things we talked about. And I want to make sure that everything's working. I did get some repositories last, that I saw. People were sending me emails. Whenever you add me as a collaborator, I get an email that basically says, hey, Tom, would you like to collaborate with this person, whoever this person is? And some of you either use the wrong name, the wrong email address. That could have been the case. You could have done that. Or you made it private and you didn't add me at all. Who knows? Maybe you forgot, right? And when I looked at it, it was inaccessible. I couldn't access it, right? So please be careful whenever there is one thing. That's why I sent you that note on Sunday, which made everyone nervous. I'm sure it made a lot of people nervous when they saw that note. They're like, tonight is the night, right? If you don't get it done tonight, it's over. I sent this note to you guys, right? And I'm sure some of you were really nervous about that note. It got you nervous, right? Don't get nervous. That was my early warning system telling you that, hey, by the way, guys, guess what? There's something due tonight, and this is your first time, and it's worth 4% of your final grade. It's not a small amount of marks. Please take this seriously. That's what I was trying to say, right? So, and again, I would say most of you, when I looked at all the people that submitted, I did see that list. Most of you, barring maybe 3 or 4 people who didn't do it, who didn't submit for some reason, submitted something. Okay, that's what you submitted. So that's what we did last week. We talked about database design principles a little bit, and we're going to continue with more of that today. And we have to because there's so much more. Now, here's something that's weird. Even though this course is called Mobile Data Management, it's not necessarily a database course. Okay? It is and it isn't. If it was a database course, you and I would be doing theory for another couple of classes, right? Maybe next class and the class after that, or maybe even the class after that. Because there's a lot to know about databases. Tons and tons of stuff to know. So I have to tell you that some of the things that you should know if you were a database designer is going to be out of scope in this course. I'm not going to talk about it. I might include it, I might put it on a slide, but I won't talk about it because you probably won't need to go into that much detail because you guys, none of you, in my opinion, are going to be database people at the end of this whole program. This is a mobile development program. It's not a database program. It's not a generalist computer science program or computer studies program. So therefore, the stuff I'm telling you is compressed. I'm telling you probably something that you might get in week 4 of a regular database course. I'm giving it to you today because I don't have time to go through 2 or more weeks of more theory. I'm telling you this in advance so you don't freak out and go, I don't know anything that he's talking about here because he's talking about something that he hasn't covered. Well, I'll tell you about it and I'll tell you the important stuff. So we talked about setting up your development environment last week. Visual Studio Code is what I recommended. And I also talked about Git and GitHub. Did everyone get their Git and GitHub working in the class? Did anyone not get it done? How about that, right? So if you haven't got that done, please let me know because every single time we get together, for the most part, including your assignment, you're going to need to do Git and GitHub. Okay, so that's something that we did kind of last time. And also even in the other course, our project management course, you're probably going to have to do it there too, right? To be a good team member. Remember I said it's almost like being a good team member in this program is like being a good roommate, right? You have to kind of clean up after yourself a little bit, do a little bit of work and contribute, right? Which is what I want you guys to do. Being able to contribute. All right. This week, we're talking about data modeling and data models, what the difference is, and something called an entity relationship diagram, an ERD, right? Again, this would be something we hit week 4 or week 3 if we're doing a real database course, okay? Database model classes and schemas we will talk about a little bit today. And database normalization and optimization I will discuss starting today, but we'll probably continue talking. One of the exercises that I have planned today is going to be this. How do we normalize the database? We'll take a look at some data, and then I'll have some ideas. I want to work with you, people that are in the class and the people that are online. I'll talk to people and say, hey, what do you think about this? All right, we'll talk about what you think of when it comes to this whole plan with data management and taking a look at a database and see what you think. Okay. Assignment ICE 2 week 2 is when it's due. That's this Sunday, and I'm just going to go up online. And if it's not active, it should be available. It says follow the class video again, or following class, right? So there is no concrete thing to do. We'll talk about this as an exercise. Typically when I say this, it means like if I tell you to do something in class, you need to watch the video. Worst case, I'll say, by the way, this is your in-class exercise. And it usually happens near the end. Sometimes we intercut where I talk about the in-class exercise the entire time. It really depends. And you have to kind of pay attention. That's what it means, right? So it could be anywhere in the video that we talk, typically at the end, okay? Again, they're all worth 4% of your final grade. You do have a chance of not doing 2 of them, if I'm not wrong, out of the 10 or 12 that we get done. If you mess up 2, even the first one, you still have 100% for your in-class exercise at the end of the day, and they're individual, which means it's you. It's not you and your partner, it's up to you. Other things I got to talk about with in-class exercises, some people are trying to be tricky. I got some really interesting submissions on the weekend, on a Sunday. Maybe they didn't try to be tricky, but they thought, maybe Tom doesn't know, right? And what I mean by doesn't know is like someone submitted an empty repository to me, right? And then later on Monday, they updated it, right? You know what's going to happen, right? If you update something on Monday and it's due on Sunday, any updates I'm not even going to count them, right? So don't do that, because if I go to GitHub, let's take a look at GitHub together, just to review what we did last week. So if I go to GitHub and I look at my stuff from last day, right? So let's say if I go to this one, MDEV1001, that's you guys, and if I look at this one, you see I have 1 commit, right? Well, that commit, it tells me who did it, right? I also have a unique commit number, right? And it tells me the day that it was done, May 10th, right? So if you did something on, let's say, for example, your thing was due on the Sunday, right? And then you did it on the Monday, it's going to have a time and date stamp, right? So if you submit on a Monday and it's due on a Sunday, and you had nothing on the Monday, but you had everything if you had nothing on the Sunday, but you had everything on the Monday, you're just going to get 0. Just letting you know. So if you're one of these people who did that, whether online, maybe it was an accident, maybe you thought you did it or whatever, it's still going to be 0. So keep that in mind. The reason why we use Git and GitHub is because I can track who does it, when it's done, by what machine. I have a lot of information that you don't even know that I get from you when you submit things on GitHub, right? So please, keep it in mind. I'm probably not a dumb person, right? Just saying, probably not. I probably know how to figure stuff out. I was probably like you at one point. I have all the tools you have, Google, ChatGPT, and even other tools that I don't mention because I don't want you guys to go down that dark road, okay? So, I understand all these things, so chances are, right, there's a chance, even a little bit small. I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm going to put my hand up. I'm telling you right now, I'm probably not the smartest person here. I probably have pretty good ways of detecting, because I've been doing this job for a bit. Some of you, I might be able to see when you're doing something you're not supposed to do. Maybe. What do you think? Right? So if that's possible, just do the right thing. Don't, the time and energy spent doing the wrong thing so much, you can just do the right thing and it's done, and you learn a lot by doing the right thing, right? So please do the right thing, okay, is what I'm saying. I'm not going to go into more of that, but that's something that I want you guys to think about. So last week we did ICE 1, and all the thing that I did for ICE 1 was just a simple git keep. That's it. There's nothing. It was empty, right? Except for this. And some people gave me nothing. And that means that they didn't follow instructions and didn't give me a git keep. If you didn't give me this and it's an empty repository and there's literally no folder structure or anything, you didn't check it, it's 0. Just letting you know, okay? So that's all that it was for last week. This week we'll continue to add to this, and there will be more than this as we go forward, okay? All right, so that is what we did last week and what we're doing this week. What I want to do right now is start off with a couple of things, to download. We're going to be doing this exercise today with SQLite, and I'm going to start that off today. So you need to do a couple things. So first, let's take a look at our Macs. I'm just going to teleport into my Mac at home to do this. By the way, I don't know if any one of you ordered your Mac Mini, but it's even another $100 off. It's so beautiful. It's actually getting cheaper and cheaper to have a really decent machine. And let's do this thing. So if you haven't had a chance to do this, you can see that even from my poor machine that's from 2015, this is my MacBook Pro, right? It still works pretty good remote, right? It's not terribly slow. It's not terribly unusable either, right? So if I can do this with my old machine, then you can do it. It doesn't have to be the latest and greatest MacBook. It doesn't have to be, okay? But here's something that I want you to try with your MacBook, okay? Or your whatever you have with you today. Whether it's a Hackintosh, where you're hacking it with your PC and you got some kind of weird VM running, or whether it's your MacBook, the latest version with the M2 chip. They're coming up with the M3 chip they're talking about now. Oh yeah, they're coming up with that. And here, I've got my thing. Try this. Try typing in SQLite 3 and press enter. And does it actually do this? Right? How are we doing with that? Does it actually do this for you? Yeah? Yeah, right? So for a Mac person, SQLite 3 is built in, right? Nothing for you to do, nothing for you to download. It's in. And we're going to do some stuff with this kind of stuff automatically. And we're going to talk about some simple commands with SQLite 3, and I'll even give you some stuff today. However, there are some things you need to do with your Visual Studio Code for today's lesson and for your in-class exercise, right? So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go into VS Code, and I want to talk about a couple of extensions that you need to download and install, all right? So here's my VS Code. By the way, whenever you see this little gear, and this has happened a couple times so far this week, it says restart to update. Please do so immediately. Don't wait for this to be updated or whatever, okay? No, we restart to update there. Okay, there we go. So. Here it is. Here's Visual Studio Code. If you go to your extensions, this little tool here, there's some stuff that's installed extensions, and I want to start typing SQL. And there's some stuff, what I want you to see is there's one called SQL Tools that I want you to install. So please take a look at SQL Tools. This is one of the installation steps for today, all right? Do you see that in Visual Studio Code? SQL Tools. Please install it, okay? Please install your Visual Studio Code SQL Tools. What it will do, right, if you install SQL Tools, all you do is you click Install in Visual Studio Code, and it'll download and install that extension, okay? There's also another one here, SQL Tools. This is from Microsoft, right? And it says SQL Tools, Microsoft SQL Server, Azure, all right? And please also, you can download that and install it. And there's also another one called a SQLite Viewer. Now, I haven't had great success with this one, but please download it and install anyway. Those are the ones. And there are others that we're going to do together, but those are the ones that we have here. Okay, so one thing to note with these extensions is that when you look at the extensions, you can see that there is the stuff that's installed, right? So you can actually scroll through all of your installed extensions for Visual Studio Code. And I'm just going to do that myself to go right into that SQL Tools stuff. So you can see the ones that I have. These are all the ones that I have for SQL Tools. This one, SQL Tools Microsoft SQL Server, right? Then there's a SQL Tools MariaDB. We're going to use that later on. And there's also SQL Tools SQLite, all right? And those are the three, in addition to the regular one, this is kind of the main one. And these ones will be installed automatically when we actually do a connection. Let's do a connection together. right? When we talk about a connection, what a connection is, right? On the left, after you install just this one, SQL Tools, you'll see this little kind of bar down here, this little like thing that looks like a database. You guys see that? How about the people online? Are you with me? Some of the people online? If you click on there, you can see that you can add a connection. You can do that. I can add a connection. And if I click add a connection, it'll ask you what type. Notice I have different types. Mike's MySQL, which is something we're going to have later on this semester, right? SQL Server from Azure, as well as SQLite, and there's another one called MariaDB. We might use that one as well. But for the ones I want you to download and install, if you click on Get More Drivers, right, it'll actually go to all the tools that you don't have, and you can add as many of those things as you want. So the ones I want you to get tonight for tonight's course are this one, SQLite Node, where it says SQLite Node. Please make sure you get this one. The rest we can do again later, but this one is required for tonight, okay? Because we're going to do that. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use SQLite. I see your hand. We're going to do SQLite with Visual Studio Code tonight. Yes. What was your question? Back. Okay. Yeah, I can go back. So again, what I went to is if I go to kind of click away there and click back, and if I kind of get rid of all this, and then you see installed, right? What I want you to install, if you type it at the top, if you type in, to install the one I want you to get is, just type in SQL Tools. If you type in SQL Tools, it's going to give you the main one that I want, which is from this fellow, Matthias Texera, and it's more than 2.7 million downloads for Visual Studio Code. You see that? That's the one I want you to install. So do that first. Install that one. After you have that, you'll see this. Do you see that? Or there might be some ellipses down here, a couple of dots, because maybe you have other things installed. And if you click on those dots, you can select this thing. Can you select this thing now? Good. Then you're going to have this thing that says, they might be closed up. It could be kind of like this. Maybe it's like this for you, right? You can open up connections, right? And then in connections, you can see that there are a few options here, but one of them is this add new connection. We see that? Again, this is all on the Mac, I'm doing it, so you guys should see what I see, right? If I click on add new connection, then you're going to see that you might have none of this here, right? And you need to click on get more drivers, right? If you click on get more drivers, the driver we're looking for is the SQLite driver, this one, okay, on the left. The SQLite tool, SQLite, this one. We want you to install this driver, right? And what this driver does is it allows us to connect to a SQLite server somewhere, whether it's on your system or online, all right? And what we're going to be doing is we're going to use this to learn about SQLite today and next week, because I want you guys to be comfortable with the command line tools with SQLite before we do stuff with Android, okay, or with iOS. Otherwise, we're going to do stuff and you're going to be like, but I don't understand why we're doing this, Tom. And now I want to build you up from nothing so that you understand what to do when we do everything. Okay, are we there? Are you good now? What happened? One sec for those people who are watching. All right. So click on Search VS Marketplace. And on the left, turn it around. Now you're going to see on the left, and what sequence you can actually move this bar. If you actually, yeah, move it that way. SQLite, let's click on that. And stop. See that? It's going to come up. And now go back to this little tool over here. Right? You click on Add New Connection, and you'll see that you have that. Good? Everyone good? Yes? What's not showing? What's not showing? What do you mean not showing? Well, so sometimes what happens is when we do this kind of thing is you need to restart your Visual Studio Code. So try doing that, right? But most of the time, all you need to do is when you click Add New Connection, you'll see this other link down here that says search Microsoft Marketplace or Visual Studio Code Marketplace for new connections. You need to do this, and then this is going to pop up next. It doesn't happen right away, and you may have to restart your Visual Studio Code. So that means that restarting for a Mac, the way that works is you close it down here with the red thing here. But remember about Macs. At the bottom, see these little things that are lit? See this little dot? This means that they're still open. So to close down something, you're going to have to right-click. I'm just going to move this little thing here so you don't see it. You're going to have to right-click, or if you're not using a mouse. By the way, for those people who are using a Mac or a PC and you don't have a mouse, a 3-button mouse, please get one. What does it cost? $20 on Amazon? Get it. All right, you need a 3-button mouse. Right? Maybe it's not for this course, but some other course in the future, they're going to ask you to do something like right-click, and you're going to be like, but I don't have a mouse. Get one. All right? Stop using the touch bar. Okay, the touch bar is nice when the thing is on your lap and you're on the bus. All right? Or if you're somewhere, like by the pool, and you don't want to have a mouse. You just have you and the laptop, right? But when you're on a desktop, get a mouse. Just easier, right? So if you don't have one, get one. So what I mean is, either use 2 fingers. It really depends on the way you set up your interactions with your Mac, or you right-click, right? And if you right-click or double-tap, sometimes there's different ways of doing things. If you right-click on this tool right here, then you're going to get a little context menu, and what you can do is I can click Quit. You can also go, if you can't do it that way because right-clicking doesn't work for you, you can always go to the Mac kind of like icon on the top left corner of your screen, and you can go to Force Quit, and then you can select the object that you want to force quit. This is like kind of like the when you do Control Task Manager. The Task Manager in PC, where if you do Control Shift Escape, try it on a PC. Control Shift Escape, and all of a sudden your Task Manager will come up, right? So that's what this is. Please don't force quit unless you absolutely have to. Force quit is actually a kill procedure on a Linux machine, and actually, lots of weird things happen with memory and stuff like this as well. So you don't want to do that unless you absolutely have to. So the right way to do it is go here and right-click and then click quit, and then it should just quit normally, right? You can always go into an app, like for example Chrome, and remember there's 2 menus with Chrome. One of them is here, and then there's one up here. And if you go to Chrome, you can also quit up here. The app itself is also quittable through this part right here. So it's totally up to you. But one thing that happens on Windows that doesn't happen on a Mac is Macs don't quit unless you tell them to, right? It kind of keeps the process in the background, right? And so if you want to restart Visual Studio Code, sometimes you need to do a hard quit, because what it does is it turns everything on and turns everything back off, or it toggles everything on and off, right? So it clears the memory, and then you should be better, right? Same thing with Xcode. If you're using Xcode for iOS, sometimes you need to quit out of Xcode. Xcode, even on a regular Mac, crashes a lot, all right? Make sure you save your stuff regularly, okay? Although it does save automatically. All right, so are we resolved? Restarting and resolve, right? Sometimes it does that. So now if I come back, you can see that Visual Studio Code, this is part of our in-class exercise for today, by the way. It's open, and I can go to this little thing here, and then I can add connection. We're not going to get to the add connection part yet, but that's part of it. Also, one thing to note is if I do Control backtick, or sometimes it's Command backtick, depending on how you set things up, or you can go to Terminal, whatever you want to do, right? So for me, you can also go to View. There's a bunch of different things here. Take a look. View has it right here. There's View Terminal, right? You can go to Terminal and go New Terminal. You can do that too, right? It's up to you which one you do. I'm going to go with View Terminal, right? And if I do, it's going to pull up my integrated terminal in Visual Studio Code. Here also, you should be able to do something like SQLite 3. You should be able to do that, right? If you want to stop SQLite 3, whether it's on the terminal here, right? You can close off the terminal, or here, you can just do a dot. This is the first command you're learning, by the way, a dot quit. All right, yeah. Dot quit actually, kind of escapes. So for those of you who are taking notes, which I'm really happy to see, right? That's the first command, how to quit out of SQLite, the terminal, okay? And the other thing that we want to do sometimes, and here's something else, this is just to finish off our installation, not because I want to do something. I want to start a brand new database, right? It's funny how databases work with SQLite. If I go to my Finder app here, and if I go to me, because usually I have some kind of thing that is like, it's all about me, right? If I go to me, which is, let's say in my Macintosh hard drive, this is what it says. If I go to users, and if I go to me, right? So let's say here's me, right? And if I want to put an application there, that's what this is. So if I do anywhere on this thing, if I do pwd, type that in, pwd, right? Then it should show you the path. This is your path in Linux. Do you guys know Linux? Maybe? Feeling like I'm like the queen, right? Yeah, you know Nilla? So pwd basically on the Mac allows you to kind of navigate. It shows you your current path in the terminal. This is which folder your terminal is pointing to whenever you're using it, okay? pwd. So now I know that I'm in the Thomas, path. This is users, and my name on the Mac is Thomas. I don't know why I called myself that. My name isn't even Thomas. Just I thought I'm going to call myself Thomas years ago, and I can't change it now, right? Because once you log in, you're. I mean, I can make another username, but then that would screw me up, right? So I haven't done that. So yeah, so this is me, and that's the first thing. So if I do the same thing, if I did something like SQLite, right? 3 has to be the 3 in there. And then if I think about, I want to go to my local path. I want to access something on my local path. What is the 2 symbols that I use to indicate that it's my local path on a Mac or Linux machine? Do you guys know this? Or even web. I want to go to my local path. Here's something easier. If I want to go up one folder, what are the 2 symbols I got to use? Double dot, right? So how do I do it if I want to just see on the same path, in the same folder? What do I do? No, it's /.
Single dot.
Okay. // like this. So if I go // right, that means I want to look in my folder, in my directory. If you don't do this, the database we're going to create right now, it's going to go somewhere else. Okay? It's going to tell you where it goes, by the way, but it's going to go somewhere else. So // means I want to put the database inside of my folder. You may also want to navigate to another folder. Like for me, maybe you want to make a directory. Let's do this. Let's do make directory, right? I want to make a directory for your course. And of course, it's going to be called something like MDEV, right, 1001. And I'm going to call it in the summer 2023. You don't have to do this because maybe this is the only time you're taking it. But for me, it's summer 2023. If I do that, right, then you can see it creates my folder. If I do an ls, this is the other command, right? So far I've given you on Linux, on Mac OS, all right, which is a Linux kernel, based on a Linux kernel, right? These are just commands you can learn if you just go up online and go, how do I change directory in Mac OS using terminal? It'll actually show you a list of commands. Here's a couple of commands. One, pwd shows you the path. Make directory, or mkdir, makes a folder for you in the current directory you're in, unless you specify another folder, right? So here I'm just going to do this. And if I want to list everything, I can just do ls, right? And ls gives me a listing of all of the folders within this folder, right? So if you scroll up, it doesn't do it in a really nice way. If you scroll up, you can see that you might see some, the folder that I created, which is MDEV, I said 2001. What did I do that for? It should be 1001. How do I rename a folder? You guys remember how to do that? How do I rename a folder? As long as it's empty, it's possible. If I do rn, does that do it? It says rn not found, right? Oh, what is it? RD? No, that's the one. MV. which is moving a folder. It's actually weird in Linux, right? Linux, actually, there is no rename command, not for folders. You move a folder from to. So you move from, so MDEV1001, you don't have to do this if you did it properly, to MDEV, right? And is it 2001 or what is it? 1001, right? 1001 M2023. If I did that, does it do it? And if I do a listing, ls, then you can see again now everything is golden. See how that's changed? Isn't that nice? But we can go one further. You know, you can notice how I can actually click on this thing. It looks like it's clickable or movable here. I can't really do anything like, I can open up a new terminal to take me there, which is interesting, but that's not what I want. I want to go in there. So the way to do that, of course, is cd space and then mdev. And if you start typing and then type tab, it'll complete the folder name. That's the way to do it. So cd space, you start typing your letters, mdev. One thing to note is that everything in Linux is case sensitive, right? Question for you, on a PC, is everything case sensitive as well? Is it case sensitive like on Linux? You're saying yes? No, no. And you're going to see that tomorrow when we get together and start making our first part of our web application tomorrow. You're going to see that it's not case sensitive at all, right? Which is a problem, right? If you try and rename something from, let's say I had a folder called Tom, capital T Tom, to Tom, lowercase t Tom, it wouldn't do anything. Because Microsoft Windows sees Tom, uppercase T, and lowercase t is the same. That's weird, right? In the Linux world, people say that like Microsoft is not normal, right? Something's wrong, right? You know, why did their operating system do that? Back in the day, Microsoft had something called DOS. That's what they call it, right? Disk Operating System. And the DOS system, whatever you want to call it back then, was very simple, right? And they wanted to make it easy for users. And so they said, we don't need it to be case sensitive. It's not easy. It actually makes it worse. So if I do that, if I do cd space this, now you can see on my path here that indeed I am in that place. That's how it goes. And now if I was to do SQLite, let's try this out. If I did SQLite3 /, which means in this folder, that's what // means, and the name of my database is going to be ICE2 caps DB for database, like this. ICE2 DB, one big thing, like this. Let's see what it does. If I press enter, it says, look, SQLite, we're good to go. It didn't give me any errors, number one, right? And if I do help, let's do the help command here to show you what it gives you. So if I scroll back up, again, you can do this nicely with the mouse if you use the middle mouse wheel to scroll up. You can scroll back up, you can see that it has some things, like for example, databases. Take a look at this databases. It says it lists the names and files of attached databases. Let's take a look there. So if I do that, if I do .databases, this is the command number 2. Second command. The first one was .quit. This is .databases. And you can see that it says users Thomas MDEV1023 ICE2DB r/w. What does r/w mean? Read and write. It means I have read and write permissions. You can change the permissions so you can only have read if you were an administrator on the database. Right now we're not talking about permissions, we're just trying to access the database. So here I've created a database and it's completely empty, right? That's what it is, okay? That's what it is. So now what I want to do is I want to create a table. You guys know SQL at all? Anybody? You know SQL, right? Doesn't matter. Same. All right? Let's try it together. This is the first time you're touching it. This is for your in-class exercise 2. All right, here we go. Ready? I'm going to type in create, right, table. And I need the name of the table here in single quotes, I recommend, right? And in single quotes, let's call this thing the movies table, right? So it's going to be called movies. Let's try it. Here's movies, right? I want to make a table called movies. Now, what else do I need to make when I add a table? Let's look it up is the answer. So if I want to add a table, So if I said, create, let's try this together, table in SQLite, right? And if you want the commands, how does it look, right? So SQLite, SQLite actually has there's tutorials, there's actually the create table command from the SQLite org. This is what it does. This actually gives you all the stuff. So here's some create table command, and most likely it might give you some examples. And if it doesn't, right, it doesn't matter, does it? Right? It says create table, right? And then we want to add some columns to the table and all this kind of stuff. That's what we want to do. So let's try and put another thing. Searching, by the way, whenever we do any tech, your searchable commands is something we all have to learn how to do better. So I'm showing you what to do. So if I did something like, hey, SQLite, create table, what do I really want here? I want an example, right? I want an example of how to create a table. Here it is, SQLite create table with examples, right? So if you didn't know anything, oh, look, this is nice. And look at this brackets here, create table, and if not exists, which means it checks to see, what it does. You can also make it so that there is a variable. They're using a variable here. We're not using a variable. And then it says open bracket. Okay, let's do that. Back to VS Code, right? So create table movies, open bracket, enter. It gives me more information, right? So now I can type in a couple of things. The name of my primary key. Who remembers or who knows what a primary key is, right, from database? You know databases. What's a primary key? A unique identification for a row, which is, what's another name for a row in database talk? How about a record, right? Or it could actually be called a tuple or tuple. Some people call it that too, right? So if we know that the movie ID would be the thing we want. So we're going to call this movie ID, right? And we want the type afterwards, which is some kind of primary key, an integer, that kind of stuff. So something like int, we'll say primary key, and then after primary key, we want something like auto increment, right? So can we do it in lowercase? Increment, or does it have to be uppercase and then not null? Does it matter? In MySQL, does it matter, right? Did I do something wrong? Does it have to be? Well, let's see what it says here in our example. It says column 1, data type, primary key, right? And then auto increment is what I added at the end, right? Because auto increment means I want to make an identifier for the row. That's what I'm doing with my primary key. By the way, we're learning right now just-in-time SQL, just-in-time information that you need, just the minimum amount to make things go. When we think about primary key, we think about it's a unique identifier, like you said, for the record, for the row, for my schema. Right now, I'm actually creating, in many ways, for my table, my database schema, which is my model for my database. I'm doing it from the top of my head. Not good, right? But we're going to add a couple of fields, attributes, also called properties from a coding perspective, right? Each field is a column. This is what we're doing. And the primary key is going to take up its own column, right? So let's go back to SQLite for a second. So again, not null. Hey, look, I put it in all caps, or I put null caps in there. And if I press enter, if it doesn't understand something, it'll tell me later, okay? So movie ID int is the way we're doing int. Is that right? It should be integer? Should it be integer? What should it be? Right? Huh? Okay. Well, int is the type, data type. Should it be int or integer? Let's take a look. Let's take a look what they give us. Maybe there's another example further down, right? So here's integer, right? Primary key. So did I mess up? I could have. Maybe I did, right? But let's continue. Let's do this more. The next one I want to add is char or char, C-H-A-R, with, I don't know, 128 characters. I can also use text, by the way, but I'm going to use char because I'm an old school kind of guy, right? So back to this, right? And let's talk about this. I'm going to say the next one, movie ID, but I want a title for the movie, right? I'm storing data. This is one of the things we're doing. So title is the movie, is the column or the attribute that we're adding in. Sometimes we call it a property or a label, okay, different things. And then followed by the type, which is char. And we can specify how much memory I want, how many characters. I want 128 characters in there, right? And then I'm going to say, well, a title for the movie table is probably 100% required. Anything that's required, we want to flag or indicate that it's not null. If we don't say not null at the end, it means that it can be empty. We don't have to take it. It's part of our constraint or validation. We're going to know about constraints a little bit today, and we're going to talk about it more next week. Not null. Okay, and here's something. I didn't put a comma last time. Is that a problem? It's a problem, isn't it? Right? So if I did this now, it's all one big line. Let's stop this thing like this and see what happens. And we need to put a semicolon at the end because it's a big command. If I press this end, it's going to say error in prepare. I want to prepare, right? It says auto increment is only allowed on an integer primary key. So even before I went to the next part, it found an issue with int. Int is not correct. It needs to be integer, but it didn't understand what I wanted. Let's try this again. Here's something you can do with your command line. Let's use the arrow keys and go up. So if I go up one, you can see I can keep on going all the way to this part. And now let's fix it. I can actually use my arrow keys to go to the left until I get to this part here where it says integer. Let's put integer in there. So movie ID, integer, primary key, not null is what I want. But I really want to start here, right? This is the first part. So I'm going to start here with movies first, press enter. And then I'm going to scroll up or use kind of the up arrow to get to this, change the name here from movie ID int to integer. And I want to add at the end a comma, please. Please add a comma at the end, all right? No comma, it's one big command, all right? So comma, enter, all right? Then the next one, which is what I already typed, which is this part. I can go back up, comma, all right? And title, and let's say another thing. Let's say we want to also have the year. And for now, we're going to say it's also a car, but the year is going to have something like, I don't know, that's just a year, like 4 digits, right? I could use a date. I could use a date, okay, but what's a problem if I use a date? There's a positive and negatives. If you know about databases, there's going to be a way to access this database at some point, right? It's going to need a date. Date is not just 4 characters. It's going to require a date format, right? And so it could be an integer that I'm looking for here, right? It could be, right? So maybe I want that. I want an integer. It has to be an integer, and it has to be a positive integer. We're going to talk about types next week. This week, we're going to keep it simple. And for today, let's just make it a car again. Let's make it a car 128. We can put whatever we want in there, okay? We also say that the year is probably not null. We need to put the year in there. And you know what? Not only is the year there, but maybe we want to put in the length of the movie, right? What is that, right? So I said length. And maybe the length is also, for now, we're going to use the same thing, right? Actually, we can use an integer here. Let's use an integer for the length. So length, we'll say integer, right? And we'll say that's also not null, right? And then for the last one, we'll say, you know, we have the title, the year, the length, maybe some kind of rating, right? The rating could be a number, right? And there's different kinds of ratings. We're going to keep this simple for now. So we're going to say a rating is an integer. What if I wanted to put the rating as a float? Do you think that's a data type? Well, if you don't know, we can look through and say, you know, data types, you know, as an example for, you know, for transactions. You can see the text is okay. We want to make a table, right? And if you look down, maybe there's something else somewhere. If I say something like SQLite table, SQLite data types, And if I looked up a list of data types in SQLite, I mean, it's pretty simple. There they are. Null, integer, real, text, blob, and others, right? So those are storage classes and types. And there's Boolean types, as well as, I use char. I mean, how's that going to work? Because it doesn't say it's a type, right? But if you look through here, you can see that there actually are varchar, which is a variable character of 255 up to. Here's example of types, right? And other ones, okay? Okay, and we're going to go through all these types later on. So real is the thing, and so is float. So we could use float if I wanted a floating point type. There's a reason for these, right, that we can use. Also decimal and other things, date and date time, and a bunch of other ones, numeric and non-numeric ones. Okay, so here I'm just going to use a float. That's what I'm going to use. So back to this. Let's just use, for rating, we'll use the float. And we'll say also that's not null. And finally, I want to use, we'll say description, and we'll put in some text. And the text is going to be optional. Maybe we'll have some text, maybe we won't, okay? And then I want to close it up. I don't put a comma, I close it up in a semicolon, and now you have this. Are you with me? If I press enter, if I did everything correct, it gives me nothing back. Ah, everything's golden. Hey, I made it cool, right? Right? And if I wanted to look at this, if I say something like tables, is that a thing? You can see I have the movies table. I can actually look up the movies table this way, right? What if I want to show everything in the table? Right now there's nothing in the table. How do I add data to a table for the first time, right? I want to add in one movie, to the table. How do I do that? I know I need the movie ID, the title, right? The year, the length, the rating, and the description. And I can do that all from code, or let's quit, right? And if I do a ls, you can see that I have an ICE2DB. I have an ICE2DB here, right? Later on, we're going to put this up on GitHub, right? We're going to put this up on GitHub. We're going to move this ICE2 somewhere else, right? So here's my ICE2DB. I want to connect to it. How do I connect to it? Now this is part of our setup, to be honest. I haven't done anything real, right? I just made a table that has no data in it, right? How do I make a connection? I'm going to click Add New Connection, and it's going to say, okay, I want a SQLite connection. Click on that, and then it's going to ask me the connection name. This is your own name. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call this ICE2 connection. Okay, that's what it's going to be called, ICE2, right? I don't need a connection group. It asked me for the database file, because SQLite requires a file. This points to the database. So we're going to navigate with the select file to where I put it. So I'm going to go to select file, and it's going to bring up a little dialog box, and I'm going to go into where it's supposed to go. So again, wherever you have your, system, I have mine, so it can show me my MacBook. I can go into my hard drive, go into users, and I can go into Thomas, that's me, and then scroll down to where I have my MDEV here, or if I put it on the, we're going to do this again. I'm going to do this all again. I'm just showing you how, this is just for setup, okay? I'm going to go click on my ICE2DB. Please do this with me. And then click Open. And when I do that, right, and click on Save Connection, right, then it's going to kind of create a connection script, right? That's what it does. I'm just going to close off this terminal for now. And notice it says, this is the connection script that it's going to save in a JSON format. What this does is it creates a .vs folder in this folder. It creates a hidden .vs folder. That VS folder is going to have all your connection data. That's what it's going to do, right? And it's going to have this file that's in here, right? And when it says connect now, before I click this, I'm warning you, because it's the first time you're connecting, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. One of the questions are, you don't have SQLite server built, built in. Do you want to add one? It's going to ask a bunch of questions. What I want you to say always is yes. Okay? If it asks you a bunch of questions, just say yes. Right? So let's try it. I'm going to click connect now. You click connect now, and let's see, does it give you a bunch of questions? It might give you some questions. You have to do this in order for you to give me your questions. What are your questions that it asked you? Does it ask you a question when you click connect now? How about the people online? Did it ask you a question? It should. What did it say? Missing extension, but you added your extension, right? So what extension? Does it tell you where to go? What is it telling you to do? You need something else. Node runtime. You need to add that in. Say press yes. Add it in, right? It's going to ask you to add the node runtime extension. So add it in. Right? Whatever it asks you to do, just say yes. Right? And then when you do, what you're going to get is this little, if you look at the connection, I open up my terminal so you can see it. Here's the connection, right? And notice how it's disconnected, right? But I have this table here and it says movies. Look at that. There's my movies table. And you see the schema. The schema, if I was going to ask you on the test, something like what a schema is the model. Think about the model for my database. This is the model where I have all of these things, the movie ID, the title, the year, length, rating, and description. I have no data. I just have the structure, which is the schema. That's what I have, the structure of my database. Okay, does that make sense? Do you see this for you? Do you see this when you point to your database? Have you got there yet? Jason says yes. How about everyone else? You're saying no. Are you not able to do it? What does it give you? It's loading. I thought you had a fast machine, man. What's going on? My machine is slow compared to yours. Mine's from 2015. All right, it's old. It's an old man, this machine, or maybe I don't know, an old machine. Are you good? No. Why? What did it give you? Did you do what I asked you to do? How about Ramona? Ramona, you good? What happened? We're going to do it all again. All right, later. But I'm here to demonstrate a couple things. All right, that I want to talk about, and I went super slow here. But what I want to be able to do at the end is, notice up here this little plus. There's a new connection. There's also another little plus here, which is a new SQL file, right? And there's also this little question mark, or sorry, this magnifying glass, right? And it's just show table records. And there's also another one over here, which is generate an insert query. A query, anytime you do anything with the database, it's called a query. We're using something called SQL. That's structured query language, right? Structured, I'm structuring a command. The query is actually a command I'm giving SQL, the database. I'm saying, do this. That's what a query is, right? So if I click on this little plus, it actually is going to make a little file. And it's going to try as much as possible for me, instead of me typing this by myself, it's going to try and help me out. Question for you lovely, intelligent people. Do I need movie ID? You say no. What do you guys think? Do I need a movie ID in my query? No. Why? It's because it's auto-incrementing. I said auto-increment, which means why would I put it in? I could put in an ID, but that's not required because the database itself will generate the ID for me. That's what auto-increment means. So therefore, I don't need that here in this function call because that's what this is, right? So get rid of it. No movie ID, okay? And as a result, none of this either. Take this away too. You don't need this here, okay? Now, what does this do? This is setting me up. This is setting me up for what I need. Let's put in a title of one of my favorite movies, right? Which is Blade Runner, right? Back in 1982, I snuck into a theater. Yeah, I was a little guy, right? I wasn't quite 18 years old. This was a restricted movie back in the day. I snuck in because I wanted to see my favorite hero, Harrison Ford, as the Blade Runner, right? And it was one of my favorite movies of all time. So Blade Runner, right? And then the year is what we want to put in. Let's put in 1982 for those people who are with me. And then the length is the running time, right? How long is it? I don't know. Let me see what that file was that I gave you. I gave you guys a file. Let's take a look at that file for a second. And it's up here on Blackboard. Okay, so if you look at Blackboard, and if you go up to weekly content, and if I go to week 2, there is a file here. It is an Excel file. Hopefully you guys can read it, the Excel file, if you guys have Excel or access to it. If I click onto this, it's going to ask me to download it, and I'm going to download this database data, right, into the place that I'm going to see it. For me, it's going to be courses and Georgian and this one. Putting it here, save. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up. Let's take a look at the data that I gave you. I did some work ahead of time for you so that you don't have to do what I'm doing here. And actually, this is an example of some data. This is not a database. What's wrong with this data when you look at it? Can someone, I want you guys as programmers, and for people who can look at this as programmers for now, is there something that you can see that might be wrong with this data? Maybe. Anybody online too?
Yeah.
Yes, tell me what's wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
So I can see a lot of like repetition, redundancy. So some names are some actors.
Yeah.
There are some names that you can see in a particular movie and in another movie. There are some directors. So basically repetitions here and there. The studios, there are some studios in common with some movies. So your
answer is wonderful. Even though this represents the data, right? It's our information. This is not a great database table. And the reason why this is not a great database table is it's breaking some constructs. It's breaking best practices. And one of them is it's this idea of normalization that you were just talking about online, which is we have some duplication. There's some actors that are duplicated throughout the time, number one. And the other problem with this data is that some of the columns have multiple entries, like a little list. Can't have lists in a relational database. Can't do that. Did you see any data type that said list? There's no data type that said list, which means all of these things in genre, in directors, in writers, in actors, those columns have problems because they're not lists. There's no such thing. That means they must be strings. And if there's strings, sure, we could put this data in there, but in terms of analysis and usefulness, right, and scalability, right, we can't do anything with this data very easily. This data needs to be cleaned, right? And so before we get there, I'm giving you this thing because this is part of your exercise for today, all right? This is one part of your in-class exercise, understanding data. Hey, I have some data. My customer, my client told me I need to make a database. What do I do with it? Should I just put it in the way they gave it to me? You could. Good. What about later on if they say, well, I want to know how many times, Harrison Ford played in the movie list. Or I want to see the frequency, that you have of Robert Zemeckis writing movies, right? Or I want to be able to organize it from all the movies that Harrison Ford and Michael J. Fox were in at the same time. Is there an overlap between those two actors? And the answer is you'd have a tough time. You'd have to kind of put up your own little functions to do that, and you have to kind of parse the data. And then, in a small list like this, there's only 10 entries, only 10, right? What if the entries were 10,000? What if there was 100,000, right? What if there was 1 million? What would you going to do with that data, right? It's tough to deal with it when it's that big. Smaller tables like this, who cares, right? We can figure it out, right? Heck, I can even look at you and tell you how many. I can count it by hand, right? But that's not the point of a database. A database is supposed to have the power to leverage all of its functionality, which we're going to get into, right? So here I've given you this, and the reason why I'm showing you this is because I can't remember Blade Runner's runtime. Blade Runner's runtime is 117 minutes. That's what I was going here for. So now that we know that, let's get back to that Mac. I'm going to go back to this. Again, as you can see, I'm literally just going back to my Mac here. And so this is 117 minutes. Can I just put it in like this? Can I go in here and put in 117 minutes. I wanted to show you this so you can see that this is the only difference, 117. Can I do that? Right? And is it an integer? Yes. Rating, right? Again, if I was going to look at my table, the rating, if I want it to be accurate for this one, if you scroll over, you can see that the critics rating, there's two ratings. The MPA rating, which is the Movie Association, Motion Picture Association's rating, which is it for everyone? Is it R? Is it X? I don't know. Whatever. What is this movie? This is you can see that it's an R-rated movie, so it's restricted for adults only, right? So when I was a kid, I told you I snuck in because I wanted to see. I didn't care about the adult stuff. I just wanted to see Harrison Ford being an action hero, right? That's all I cared for. And you can see that its rating was 8.1. So 8.1, let's go back. And I'm going to go back to this. And here is a float, and I'm going to put in 8.1. Well, that's weird. It says rating float, but it didn't give me float. It gave me this. Is this right? I feel weird. Something's wrong. I don't know, right? Well, I'm going to put it in. I'm going to say, well, this is a float. Can't I just put in 8.1? Like this, 8.1. Can I do that? You say yes? Okay. And then my description, I'm going to leave blank. So I'm just going to leave that blank because that's an option, because my description is, it doesn't have to be null. There's no not null next to it. And when I do this, right, at the top, you can see that when you come to this thing, it says detach file, right? That's what it says here. But it also says, if I hover over, there's this run on active connection. This run on active connection. See this? When I highlight it, it's this little command here. If I click onto it, if there's a problem, right, it'll give me the errors here. In this case, there was no problem. So it added my movie, Blade Runner, the way I put it in. Now, the great thing is, if you go here to this little magnifying glass, and if I press onto it, it will show you the table data. That's what this will do, right? And so the reason why I'm using Visual Studio Code is, as a viewer, I don't want you to work hard, right? Well, I do want you to work hard. I don't want you to work hard when it comes to this. When we make our data, you can add data just like this. Here's another thing you can do. What if you didn't want to do this? You could do this in command line. You can open up SQLite 3, go in, type this exact thing, insert into movies, and this is called a query, like we said. In many cases, you can save this as an SQL file, .SQL, and it'll actually remember this query. And you can actually load a query, you can save it, you can do all kinds of stuff, the way this works. So take a look at this. It's pretty good. It added my movie Blade Runner, and we're good to go. Beautiful thing about this little query is I could change this because I haven't saved it. Look, it's not saved, right? So I can just change this and just change what this says. So instead of Blade Runner, let's put in another one. Let's put another favorite movie of mine. Well, you guys know Star Wars, right? So Star Wars, you should. Star Wars. I'm sorry. And we're going to say episode 4, right? A New Hope. It's a big, long line, right? I don't know how many characters that is. I'm just putting it in. Don't know, right? And then it was done in 1977. We know that for sure. I don't know the running time, but I can tell you that George Lucas at the time was a big fan of, the hero's journey. And the hero's journey was all about the path of the hero from the ordinary world into the special world and back. And he became the master of both worlds at the end. This hero's journey, you can look it up. Joseph Campbell was the person who wrote about this. And he wrote a book I read when I was a little, much little. It's called A Hero with 1,000 Faces. It's a very famous book now, but it's a academic book, which means if you were to read it, heck, even if I was to read it, I'd be like, okay, it's time for sleep. It's like I'm talking like super, super challenging sometimes to read that language because it's very academic. It's an academic book. It's not a story book, right? Okay, so 1977, he wrote this. George Lucas was the director, and I don't know the running time, but I guarantee it's probably close to 120 minutes because I believe actually it's probably like 121 minutes. Let's see if I'm right. 121 minutes, right? So if I look down here and if I look back at my little database, And you can see that, or this is my data anyway, it's not a database. Here's episode 4, George Lucas. He was the director and the writer. These are the actors at 121 minutes. Yay. And going back to that, the other thing was the rating. So what is the rating for this thing? And you can see that it's probably going to be something like 8 something. This is 8.6 for the rating. It's a pretty good, nicely rated movie. And it should be because it's one of the classic movies, sci-fi movies of all time, Star Wars, right? And it made a huge franchise, right? Both on movie, TV, video game, books, go to conventions, people dress like Jedis, all kinds of crazy stuff. They even made a religion out of this thing, right? So there we go. And if I go here and I kind of click this little go button, it's going to do that. And then I can just generate the query again. I'm just going to close these off. You can do that. And if I generate the query again by pressing this little magnifying glass, you can see now that I have both. And here's the auto incrementing key, 1 and 2. 1 was the first ID and 2 was the second one. Questions around this process? This process, there's 2 things we're doing out of the 4 things we need to do for this assignment that you're going to be given. That's going to be due in a couple weeks. We need to be able to do full CRUD. I want you guys to be able to demonstrate full CRUD. CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete, right? That's what I want to be able to do with each of these tables, with each record in the table. I want to be able to do that, right? And this is just an example of how I want your Visual Studio Code to function, right? So in class exercise 2, if I was going to summarize it before we get back into it again, I'm going to show you again how to do this in a bit. This is what I want. I want you guys to make your in-class exercise 2 run like this for Visual Studio Code, all right? Demonstrate it for me. And then you're going to put it up on, I want the database itself, that little database, up on GitHub. That's what I want you guys to give me, okay? Let's take a short break. We're sitting at 5:20. I've talked for about an hour and a bit. This is a great time to take a short break. We'll get back into the heavy lifting of the theory that I want you guys to practice, right, for today. All right? Let's take a short break. I'm going to stop recording now.